If you can survive a Terminator, you can survive a volcano. We blast into 90s disaster season with Dante's Peak, starring some loser from James Bond and Sarah Connor herself, Linda Hamilton. Will this hold up? Only one way we're going to find out. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
Coffee.
As soon as he said it, I knew that was going to be what you were going to start this with.
Strangely enough, that's the only line in this movie I recognized. And I didn't even know it came from this movie.
Oh, I mean, I didn't realize it was a famous line that had overshadowed or went beyond the movie's reach.
Same. I thought for sure that came from, like, you know, one of those early 2000s comedies of like Office Space or something. So it's showing up here. I was like, oh, that's weird.
Wild stuff. This is a movie podcast, everyone, where we work through franchises, seasons of movies, and we're starting a new season today. Is the bold premiere of 90s disaster season, which of course is going to be building up to a non-90s movie, but that's because there's a sequel to a 90s disaster movie coming out in the form of Twisters. So we're doing a whole season built around 90s disaster movies.
Twisters is 90s at heart.
Yes.
We'll just say that.
Yes. So we're kicking things off with Dante's Peak, which is a volcano movie. You might notice there's another volcano movie that we may or may not be doing in the next episode.
What's that one called, Pete?
Volcano.
Oh, wow. Branding was really strong on that one.
Yeah, well, what's wild is this is one of these examples in movie history where somehow two movies with similar enough premises came out very close together. And, you know, I was checking off air last time we recorded just how close they were, because I wanted to make sure we did them in the order they came out. And they were like a month and a half apart. Like, they were super close. So these are both from 1997. Next week, we'll be looking at Volcano starring Tommy Lee Jones. But this week, we got Pierce Brosnan, if I say his name correctly. Linda Hamilton, you know, I mean, this is like the only thing I know she did, like, after the Terminator movies. It's weird. It's just this. I don't know anything else.
I looked at her filmography because I was thinking the same thing. I was like, Terminators and then this. And what else did she do? And she has a very long film history, but I can't say I've actually seen any of it.
No, I mean, she did eventually show up on Chuck, but I'm not counting that because that was like a more modern TV show thing. I mean, like, I'd feel like after Terminator 1 and 2, she'd have had like a more prolific career in the 90s, but seemingly not so much. So,
no.
But hey, yeah, so it's a mountain. I want to say it's in the northwest of the US, but I mean, I'm just guessing based on the look of the place.
Yeah, that seems right. I'm sure they said it at some point. I'm not sure specifically where it is set, though. They keep on making references to Portland. So, oh, wait, there it is. It is Washington State. So, as far northwest as you can go.
There you go. Yeah, that makes sense. So, yeah, it's basically just as what you expect it is. There's a small town at the bottom of a volcano. Pierce Brosnan's the geologist who comes in to investigate it, and he suspects that an eruption is imminent. And he's not believed for a bit, but of course it's going to happen because it's a disaster movie. Of course it's going to happen. So that's the basic premise. We'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we go into spoilers. If you are enjoying the show, I'll just remind you, hit the like button on YouTube, helps us out a lot. And of course you can get bonus shows from me and David over on Patreon. I'll tell you more about them at the end of the show though. So yeah, very, very 90s movie. There's a lot of 90s things in this that I'll point out as we talk about it. But obviously, we have done a few seasons now of disaster movies from the 70s, which is kind of like the original heyday of them, and the 90s had this resurgence. Mainly, I would guess, thanks to the fact that between the 70s and 90s, there was a move forward in terms of the quality of special and visual effects. Now, that's not to say that things have changed that dramatically, because I wouldn't say that these movies from the 90s are that CG heavy. I'm sure there is a little bit of it, but it's not really what it's focused on. It's actually still a lot of the same old techniques. It's miniatures, it's practical effects. It's just that through the course of like things like Star Wars, ILM, and all these places sort of bubbling up at the end of the 70s into the 80s, all these techniques had advanced. They'd all gotten a bit sharper. They'd all gotten more dense, more interesting, and we're clearly in a different era of visual effects when you get to the 90s versus the 70s. So I think that's one of the comparison points we'll probably make a little bit as we go through these movies, is like just how different things are to those 70s films.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, just from this one, a lot of differences in how it's handled. I think that one hallmark of the 70s disaster movie is how slow-paced it really felt, how much it really felt like it was dragging out the sort of, everything's, we're learning about the characters, and then like the thing happens, but it's a very slow burn, pun intended for Towering Inferno. But this is right up there with every other 90s action movies where it's like, even before the disaster happens, there's got to be at least 3 tense, heart-stopping scenes of whatever we can come up with.
Yeah, you've got that. That said, though, what's weird is we're now so far removed from this. I mean, there's a bigger gap between us in this movie than this movie and the 70s movies we did. And I think that what bears out from that is that I do think this movie is closer to 70s disaster movies than it is of like a movie that would come out now. For whatever that's worth, right? And I'm not saying, obviously there's differences, but I think because a lot of the effects and stuff are still pretty old school techniques by today's standards, where everything would just be CG, it still felt more old school to me in a lot of ways. So,
oh yeah, no, this movie especially. I mean, I'm curious to see how it's going to shake out over the course of the whole season. But this movie, they did a lot with practical effects and like miniatures and stuff, and it shows. You can really feel that like this is stuff that was filmed in camera because the CGI just wasn't there yet.
I mean, I think we're going to see a mix of it over the course of the season. I mean, the 90s is very much a transition period of where it started to come in. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen it. I'm going to assume that the Twisters and Twister are CG because,
I don't know. I think they might have just made some tornadoes for the hell of it. Yeah, probably CG. But it's also one of those things where that's the sort of thing that CG was doing well back then, is a bunch of like nondescript sort of like string looking stuff. It's only when you get into the issue of like, if like in this film, lava flows and stuff like that liquid sort of stuff is a lot harder to get with 90s CG than just general particle stuff.
So yeah, I'll be curious to see that as we go through this season as well. So there's not really much more to add about the premise of the movie, really. Obviously, we'll get into all the details and stuff and spoilers, but first, I guess before I ask the usual question, I'll ask, had you seen this before? Is this a first time watch?
I thought I did. Maybe I'm thinking of Volcano, but going through this, nothing was jumping out of me as familiar, so I guess not.
Yeah, that's fair. I think the first time, I have seen this a couple times, and the first time I was in school, I believe it was something that was thrown on in geography, which in geography in school was also, geology and everything that sort of goes along with it. It wasn't just, the map.
Earth science class.
Yeah, pretty much, but they just called it geography. And what's funny, actually, is that this is a very Hollywood movie with lots of Hollywood things that we'll talk about, and I'm sure actual scientists that know this stuff would probably pick holes in a lot of it. There's some stuff we can pick holes in, but there's definitely stuff that the experts will pick a lot more holes in. But I think what's weird is out of this and Volcano, this one gets almost just this like pass because Volcano's inherently a lot sillier with its premise. So this one like looks like the more authentic one, but it's not really. It just feels like it because next to Volcano it's a bit more grounded.
I mean, I haven't seen Volcano that I know. Like I said, I think I might have seen it, but I'm not sure. So
I mean, do you know what the premise of Volcano is?
I'd imagine it's a volcano, but
do you know where
do you know
what the volcano is?
That question makes no sense to me, so no, I guess not. What is the volcano?
It's a volcano that rises up in the middle of Los Angeles.
This is the sillier one compared to that one?
No, I said volcano's the sillier one. I'm saying this one.
Okay.
This one
Jesus
looks more grounded in comparison because Volcano exists.
Sorry, I misheard that. That would have been crazy to me if this is the sillier one.
Yeah, that's like it's like a stealth volcano that rises up.
Yeah, that sounds dumb. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's like fault lines and stuff there. It's not impossible, but that sounds stupid.
Yeah. It's definitely more silly. So, yeah. Okay, I'll ask the question. David, what did you think of Dante's Peak?
As much as we just said it's the more grounded, it's still super silly. It's still very dumb fun. Honest to God, I was sitting there after I finished it trying to figure out whether or not I liked it. And I couldn't really come down on a side because I can't say that I was really like into the movie at any given point because it was just so cheap and like formulaic, and like everything that was happening, I was like, okay, yeah, and then this and then that. Like it didn't feel like anything inherently new to it, but at the same time, it wasn't doing anything like awful either. And I think the special effects, as much as they are all practical effects, but the effects in general are consistently great looking. I don't think that there was any period in this where I said like, oh, that's like a corny looking volcanic eruption or something like that.
I think the effects are what they focused on. I mean, I didn't watch it, but there was like an hour long making of documentary, and I watched like the first minute of it, and all of the introduction montage was all, look at them shooting all these effects in miniatures, and look at them showing buildings collapsing in the town. It's like that. Right. That's what they were focusing on. That was their crown jewel of this movie.
Yeah, and in that case, I mean, yeah, it's fantastic in terms of effects. I think there's some stuff that still holds up today, specifically because it was done in miniatures and such like that. But when it comes to the plot itself, like, I'm not attached to any of the characters, no matter how much they want me to endear to them. Like, it's predictable from beginning to end.
David, Pierce Brosnan lost a loved one in a backstory, and he might never reconnect again.
Yep.
But Sarah Connor's here, so he might.
You know, there's the beginning of this movie, and I'm not talking like the prelude. The beginning of this movie is, hey, Pierce Brosnan, you're on vacation, but something weird's going on, so we need you to check it out. And then he checks it out, and they say, okay, thanks, Pierce Brosnan, but you're too tense, so you need to go on vacation. And I'm like, what the hell was this? Why did we bother with him being on vacation if it was just going to be like a, oh, never mind, you need to go on vacation again? And they didn't even like bring up the earlier vacation thing. All in all, it just felt like if it were put out today, I'd accuse it of AI writing, because it is so formulaic that it's just like boom, boom, boom. I've seen this all before, but the special effects are pretty.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I think I enjoy it well enough for what it is, which is not to say that it's particularly, I don't disagree with anything you just said. But the effects are good. I have a bit of a nostalgia for these types of movies from the 90s, specifically, because that's when I was a kid. I was growing up in the 90s, and I saw stuff like this. Although I think it was a few years later before I saw this one, because I saw it, I think, when I was like 11 or something like that. But
that's
there's this kind of a pleasant sort of like comfort food quality to this type of movie, as formulaic as it is. That said, though, I don't think it particularly stands out amongst other disaster movies. I think having Linda Hamilton is probably the most exciting thing it's got really going for it. I will say the effects look good, but one thing that sticks out to me watching it again is that there's really not enough lava stuff in this. Like, there's only like 2 quick scenes of lava. We'll talk about what they are in spoilers, but it doesn't really focus on the lava. Now, for as silly as it is, you're going to get your money's worth of lava next week. Don't you worry.
Oh, good.
You're going to get all sorts of lava. And I think maybe one of the things that I think holds this back is not necessarily that it's not good enough, is that it's not silly enough. And what I mean by that is, like, just to spoil some, like, I kind of like Volcano. We're going to talk about that next week, right? And one of the reasons why I like that is because it is silly, and it has these over-the-top moments that I really like and think are funny. This, like, has one moment that kind of goes into that territory, or not 2, now I'm thinking about it, but they're not quite good enough. They're not quite there enough and ridiculous enough for me to be like, yeah, this movie's awesome because it's doing this stupid thing. It's just a little bit too holding it back. It's almost like it's just taking itself just a touch too seriously, right? Just a touch. And I
know exactly what you mean. I can feel that same vibe to it.
Yeah.
Like it feels like if they had just really leaned into some of the sillier character aspects or sillier moments that they have, then this could have been a great popcorn flick of just laughing at how dumb it gets at times. But like every once in a while, they'll have a scene with them like doing a substantial character death, and they play it totally straight. And it's like, but like, I'm actually feeling kind of bad now. It doesn't quite feel like it's on that same level. It's just a bit too serious at times.
Yeah. So I think out of the 2 Volcano movies, this is always the one that I've liked less. And I know that's not like if anything, I think I'm in the minority. I think most people who saw these at the time think this is the better movie. And arguably it is the better movie on a pure objective kind of like quality sense. But, I like the sillier one. And I like Tommy Lee Jones more than Pierce Brosnan. I'm sorry, I said it.
I mean, yeah, as much as you say the critical reception of it, I will point out that according to the Wikipedia article, it says that on Rotten Tomatoes, Dante's Peak has a 28%, whereas Volcano has a 49%. So
that surprises me. I'm going more just in the vibes of what I remember hearing like over time. Clearly, some of these critics are on my side, and I'm okay with that.
Right.
But, yeah, I don't know. But it's not a hard watch. It's an easy watch. It's 100 minutes. I think it goes in well enough for what it is, but it is not high art. I think, as we talk about this, we're going to be having fun, kind of poking at it a little bit and whatnot. We're not going to be sitting here talking about great character themes and like journeys and arcs and whatever else.
You know what I loved most when you said just then of Pierce Brosnan like lost a loved one and will he ever love again sort of thing? Yeah. I love how that didn't matter. Well, like it was brought up one time and then after that it's like, all right, well,
it's not even so much for me that it doesn't matter. It's just that it doesn't, like, I feel like there should have been like a struggle for, like, say if they'd sold me the idea that he was reluctant to even like entertain a possible relationship and he had to actually get over that by the end, that'd be something. But he seems kind of into the idea pretty quickly, and before even anything starts happening, like halfway through the movie, they're already basically like, we're kind of into each other, aren't we? And then just chaos happens, and the action movie plays out, and then that, that's it. Like, it's not like, he wasn't willing to admit his feelings, but then going through all this made him realize, you know what, I have to be honest, I have to like get this off my chest and say how much I care about you, blah blah blah. No. Like, it doesn't do any of that drama. So
remind me when we get to the midpoint of this movie to bring up the bicycle line, because good lord, that bicycle line.
Oh dear. Yeah, I mean, I guess there is a few things where you can feel like they're going for a certain like trope, but they're not quite leaning on it heavy enough to even be a good example of the trope. I'm thinking specifically how there's kind of like a villainous so Linda Hamilton's the mayor, but there's like a villainous like politician character who doesn't want to like take any of it seriously because they've got to deal with this millionaire who's going to bring jobs to the town, and he's adamant they don't want this to happen. And it feels like in another movie, this is supposed to be the Jaws mayor. This is supposed to be the one who's impeding things, and he's kind of villainous, and maybe you'll enjoy if he meets his demise later. But he feels so undercooked and has so little screen time that it doesn't really feel like it's even like committing to actually doing that bit.
Yeah, it feels like this movie may have been produced like by people who are too concerned about getting it right. Because it's one of those things where as soon as stuff starts kicking off, all of the characters are immediately on the side of like, okay, tell us what we need to do, U.S. Geological Survey team. We will listen to whatever you have to say. And nobody really fights against them at any point. There's no character who says like, screw that. This town needs to pull in $1 billion or else something. It's just, okay, let's listen to what these people have to say. And then the main criticism is that, or not criticism, the main issue is that they're too late. That's the main problem here. The villain is not a person. The antagonist is not, someone who's getting in the way. It's, we just waited too long.
I mean, there's conflict, but the conflict's all about the predicting of it rather than like conflict. Because after, once the volcano stuff actually really starts happening, it's really just about saving, like, some kids. It's not really, they're not really doing the wider thing of like the evacuation, which obviously is happening, happens kind of just in the background. We just hear that it's happened and that everyone's out, and it's like, okay, all right, so. There was no like close calls and try to save people. It seemed like a good chance for an action sequence there, but
nah,
that's fine. We'll focus on Linda Hamilton's kids. That's what we'll do.
That's clearly the draw of the movie.
Yes. So it makes some of its choices, which are for the worse often. Sometimes for the better, but mostly for the worse.
Mostly for the worst. Yeah.
Yeah. That said, I still find it like a really easy watch. One of the things I'll say is that the music, which is by James Newton Howard, started up, and I'm like, this sounds really familiar. And I assumed I was just probably like thinking of another one of his scores, but I wasn't, because it occurred to me what the main theme sounded like. It sounds a lot like the main theme from Deep Blue Sea, which was a score that Trevor Rabin did.
Okay.
But it was bugging me. Like, there's a couple of notes in like the theme. I was like, oh, this is making me think of something else. I didn't think I remembered the music from this, but I didn't. I was thinking of Deep Blue Sea. So just similar themes there for whatever reason.
That's fair. In terms of effects, there's one thing I do need to bring up, because as much as they did a good job of all the practical effects and whatnot, there was one special effect that they kept coming back to that I think that they thought was going to look better than it did. And that is, a lot of this movie is following around Pierce Brosnan and Linda Hamilton as they're driving in a truck as the volcano's going off. And they do this strange effect where they want to show from the perspective of inside the truck, looking up at the volcano as Linda Hamilton's looking at it. So what they do is, ostensibly, they try to show like the kind of very light opacity of Linda Hamilton's face looking at the volcano to give the effect that like we're looking through the window and it's just her face reflecting back at us. But what it ends up feeling like is like a 90s R&B montage where you just get that like weird opacity like face that just goes over the camera for a while. It really stands out as poorly done for me. And they do it like 5 or 6 times over the course of the movie, and it bugged me every time.
Fair enough. Spoilers?
Yeah, I mean, I can't think... honest to God, like, whatever you think is going to happen in this movie, it does. Like, it's straight up exactly what you think it is. You may get 1 or 2 surprises with how just weird of a character death you get, but that's about it.
Yeah, so I'll just say spoilers for Dante's Peak. You've been warned. Not that there's too much to be spoiled by, but, you know, always worth saying. I want to actually dock some points from it right away because it starts off with the Universal logo as you'd expect. And it's...
Yes.
I don't know why you're excited by this.
No,
but...
I know exactly what you're saying because it caught me off guard too.
What caught you off guard? I don't know. I don't think you know what I'm going to say here, to be honest, David.
All right. Well, then I'll pause judgment. What were you going to say?
Well, this is the early to mid 90s Universal logo. It was replaced probably about a year after this. Honestly, this is quite near the end of this one's tenure. This is the one where it's, the text comes around the planet as you expect, but it's more horizontal than diagonal, which is fine. It looks a little bit more dated, which is not what I'm complaining about. I like it well enough. The reason why I'm docking a point is because I really like the version of the Universal music that used to play on this logo, but this movie starts with atmospheric music instead of the Universal music, and I was disappointed because they completely did like a new theme for Universal when they brought in the new logo after this, and I was disappointed I didn't get my 75th anniversary theme that I really like from this universe.
That's fair.
Yeah. Am I right in thinking that's not what you were going to say? That's
not at all what I was thinking. My version of it that I rented off of YouTube was they played the new updated Universal logo.
Oh, no, I got the time appropriate one.
Well, that's the thing. It then immediately went into the time appropriate one because they wanted to play the atmospheric thing. And I was like, why did we double up here, guys? But I guess that's just a version difference.
I mean, I think it makes sense on a disc because they'll usually play like whatever the current logo is before the menu, right? And then but once you play the movie, I would always want the time appropriate one. It always annoys me when I'm watching a movie from the 70s and the shiny new Warner Brothers logo plays and I'm like, that's not what this came out with. Shut up.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's probably also a thing of they had the atmospheric stuff already on there as well. So they had to keep that in as part of it. And they wanted also to have their new logo. So I'd imagine they would have cut it if they could have, but then they were like, well, we can't. So here's both.
Yeah, no, I didn't get the new one first.
Fair enough.
But yeah. So anyway, so it's not really a complaint. So I can't blame the movie. It's not a genuine critique. It's just a personal little bit of disappointment for me.
Look, it won't affect the official rating at the end, but you're on thin ice, movie.
I don't know. I'm really nostalgic for the music that used to play on that one. It's the same music that play. I think it. Well, again, I think it plays at the start of Casper. Jurassic Park commits the same sin. Actually, it's this logo, but you don't hear the music. It does that like the atmospheric stuff leading into it. But anywho, so. The movie, there's some smoke and fog. There's clearly been an eruption, so it's actually a little prologue scene of a prior eruption a couple of years, before the rest of the movie, where Pierce Brosnan's like rushing to their base, wherever him and his fellow scientists are. They've been monitoring this eruption, and his not wife, because he mentions later they weren't married, but the love of his life is there, and he's like, "Hey, we need to go. We're too late. We have to get out of here now." So he gets there, and they go into the truck, and they're driving the truck, and I have to say. This woman's death is actually a lot more grisly than I would have expected in this movie, because effectively there's just like rocks flying downwards like a shower because of the eruption, and one like comes through the roof of the truck, and he looks over and you just see like blood coming down like the front of her face, and I'm like, you know what? That's actually quite grisly looking. Like, you didn't see the impact, obviously, but it still looks pretty nasty. So yeah, we get this tragic death to start the movie off with. Very 90s, does it? Like, I feel like a lot of movies in the 90s will start off with the hero losing someone they care about. I'm thinking opening a cliffhanger. I'm thinking opening of, I don't know, there's tons of examples, but
I mean, it is literally the easiest shorthand for troubled character.
Yes.
Like, you don't need to do anything else. All you have to do is just show that the partner died, and there you go. There's your character development, which is proof in this movie, because name one other thing about Pierce Brosnan's character that is earned in this movie. His job doesn't count.
He's always wanted to try fishing.
And that is revealed like 20 minutes from the end of the movie. So
if that, it may even be closer, to be honest.
Yeah.
But this is his one thing, right? He's very cautious because of this and takes the threat seriously. You kind of alluded to something before we get to spoilers, but you said that they do this weird thing where he's kind of already meant to be on vacation and he's called in to go check Dante's Peak, which implies they think it's serious, because otherwise why would they call him in? They don't really give us a reason why he had to be called in.
Right.
So it would make more sense that he's just been called at the start of the day to come in because they've got a thing for him to go check. And then you can do go on vacation later, like they do. But they sort of just like, oh, I'm sorry I took you off vacation. You do actually need it. Go on vacation. Like, it's a weird, it would double back.
What they should have done is specifically said, like, hey, look, I know you're going on vacation in like 3 or 4 days. I got a real quick job for you. Just go ahead and check that out. And then that would also play in the audience's mind that idea of like, oh dear God, he was 2 days from retirement sort of thing, where like, is he going to make it to vacation? Who knows?
And he's doing like push-ups right next to his bed when they get the call. And like, it just made me think, like, this is like Apocalypse Now. I remember Martin Short at the start of Apocalypse Now, like doing like push-ups next to a bed. I'm like, is this what you're going for a movie? We go.
My favorite thing is that I felt like they were trying to go for the Pierce Brosnan as like a heartthrob angle. And so they were, showing him doing push-ups, and I expected them to like show off his physique and stuff later. Obviously he's got the British accent going for him. But what I was waiting to happen never did. And instead, the first time we see him like walking around Dante's Peak, he's got the 90s sunglasses on with like the chain around his neck that you only see in like 80-year-olds. And I'm like, well, I guess that was a style thing back then, but oof, doesn't make him any sexier.
So we see him briefly at their headquarters, and we get a quick glimpse of the other scientists we're going to see more of later. But for the most part, it's just, hey, there's this thing in Dante's Peak, go check it out. Cut to Dante's Peak. Let's meet Linda Hamilton. She's a single mum with 2 kids and a dog, apparently. Although, to be honest, when the dog came up like an hour later, I genuinely didn't remember them introducing a dog.
I think the dog belongs to the grandmother.
Okay. I still didn't remember. Like, see, when there was a moment later on where the girl started yelling, and I was like, oh, that sounds like she's yelling for a dog. And I'm like, I don't remember there being a dog, though. So maybe there was some deleted scenes where the dog was more prominent and they've just trimmed it down so much that you barely noticed there's one. But
yeah. I mean, it was definitely, I remember they're introducing a dog, but it is literally just like, hey, the dog wants to come with us to the hot springs. And that's it. That's all you get.
So... But no, we get the sense that Linda Hamilton's like late for her like, there's like a ceremony in the middle of town. There's a bit of a parade. We learn that this is this was voted the second most popular place to live in America. That's under a population of 20,000, so small towns. And I'm like, you know what? I'm glad you gave me that number, because when it cut to the street and it looks like a sort of typical small town in a movie, I thought to myself, this street looks really full. This is a lot of people. But when they said under 20,000, I went, you know what? 20,000 is enough people to fill this street. So fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, you just haven't specifically said it yet. She is the mayor of this town.
I think I said that. I said she's the mayor.
No, you didn't. I was waiting for it, because that's the point where I was like, it's crazy to me, the fact that she is the mayor of this town, because we also see her throughout this. She is like running a diner as well, or a cafe. I don't know how you want to call it. But it's just amazing to me that these small town mayors, like, yeah, I don't make any money from the mayoring thing, so I still have to do my day job.
Yeah. It's, you know, she's late. She's trying to find her son. She can't find her son. She shows up. They do one of the other 90s tropes here, which is that her daughter, who's like, I don't know, 6 or 7, something like that, she is like really smart for her age and is like kind of like keeping the mother in check by like saying, hey, remember the woman you need to thank, her name's Karen, remember this, remember that, like she's the adult in the house, is the 7-year-old. They do that trope.
it kind of peters off by the end of the movie. She does just feel like a normal kid, but in this opening scene, she definitely feels more responsible than her mother, and it's so much of a 90s trope.
Yeah, it's definitely a first act thing. Although the son, who's like 12 or 13, he's just driving a car later like there's nothing to it. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that if I tried to drive a car now, having never taken any driving lessons, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't do as well as this kid is doing, and I feel like I'm sensible enough to get the gist of it.
I mean, it's also one of those things, you're in a small town with like a more rural population, you learn how to drive a little bit earlier. I'm willing to forgive that. The part that I'm not willing to forgive is, as you said, the age is left a little bit ambiguous, but he does seem to be about 12 or 13 years old. Linda Hamilton, when she's looking for her son at the beginning of the movie, just straight up throws the son's bedroom door open. And he's not in there, but like, that is a 13-year-old boy, Linda Hamilton. You do not do that. yeah. Like another movie might have started this off with her walking into something dangerous. Yes, exactly.
And traumatizing the poor boy for life.
You played a very dangerous game there if he was in there.
Yes. It's amazing how many parents don't realize that when the kid gets about 12, 13, that you should always knock before you go in the bedroom.
Yep.
Valuable advice for any like parents out there who you've got a son who's like maybe 8 or something. You're like, in a few years' time, you have to start being careful. Just be careful.
As soon as he hits like his 10th, 11th birthday, you tell him and unwrap a gift, and that will be a lock for his door. You can just say, here you go.
Well, there was a joke in Modern Family, which I never kept up with, but I watched the first few seasons. There was a joke in an early episode where, because the kids walked in and the parents having sex in one episode, the parents put a lock on the door, but the joke is the lock, you could hear it every time they locked it. So like you would just hear this like click clink, and like the kids would just look up like, oh no, it's happening. Like they'd always know. So there's a danger.
No, you get a quiet lock. I feel like that goes without saying.
Yeah. And that's it though. If you're not a shy like 13-year-old, just just open your door and just announce to the household, Mother, I am going to be masturbating. Could you please not enter my boudoir for the next 30 minutes? Thank you.
You know, because of the way you say that, I immediately picture as like a mid-1700s, like aristocratic French household.
Well, I just thought saying it posh would make it sound funnier than I'm having a wank, don't come in.
No, I mean, you're right. But I still don't want to hear either of those.
So if I don't traumatize you at least once per episode, what am I even doing here? So
that's fair. Yeah. I would love to go back and see how many times I can mark down and say, like, why'd you do that, Pete?
That feeling you're feeling right now, that's why I did that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, but she gets late to her speech. They're having a thing because they won this or they came second in this competition, which, to be fair, I did like the little bit of character you got from the motel owner when Pierce Brosnan's like, oh, what town was first? And he's like, I don't know, some piece of shit town in Montana. And they're like, okay, you've got a bit of character. I like you, scruffy old man.
My main question is, how many, like, spots down the list did they have full like parades and ceremonies for, you know? Like, at first place, I get it, totally fine.
Sure.
Second place, that seems weird that they had a whole ceremony just celebrating they came in second place.
Yeah,
like,
well,
is it like top 10 they all had a thing?
Well, I wasn't sure if the parade was for being second place or if it's because this investment was coming from this billionaire or millionaire or whatever.
They had a bunch of signs up saying like it's the annual, like, I don't know, it was some word that started with like a PH, but like it was a festival thing.
All right, so that makes more sense to me. It's like an annual thing anyway, but they're making a bigger deal this year because they came close to winning, and they think, oh hey, we could be number one next year because the town we're going to improve, we're going to
that's true,
get all these new jobs, blah blah blah. So fair enough, I guess. But as soon as she comes off stage, Pierce Brosnan comes up and he's like, "Hey, I'm Harry from the Geological Survey so-and-so place," whatever the place was called.
No, you're right. That's right.
Was that right? Okay. I nailed it. Thanks, everyone.
It's the GSSOS, the Geological Survey so-and-so.
The pause was working for me, but I also needed to sneeze, so I thought I'll just wait until I sneeze.
Okay, good.
It'll work for both. No, so he's like, "Hey, I'm so and so," and she's like, "Oh yeah. Your boss told me you'd be coming, and I have to show you around some places for your survey." And he's like, "Yep, is now good?" And I thought, Pierce, like, obviously she says yes, and she does like take you and shows you around, and we get the whole idea that her life's a bit hectic because she has to go pick up her son first, and there's a couple of little interruptions. But I thought, she just walked off the stage after giving a speech. I feel like under any normal circumstances, now would not be the good time for this. This is like the worst possible time to ask someone to like take you somewhere and be a tour guide.
But you don't understand. He's super serious about volcanic threats. He needs to check this now.
And they introduced that the son likes to hang out in this mine, which he's not supposed to go in because it's dangerous. But this is important for later in the movie. This is your Chekhov mine.
I mean, that's the thing. I kept this mine, pardon the pun, but in mind this entire time, and I kept waiting for it to come back, and it just didn't until finally the very end of the third act. It's like, oh nope, we are paying that off.
Yeah. So she wants to drop the kids off at the grandmother's house, which is notably not her mother, but her ex's mother. So there's kind of like a weird relationship there where obviously she likes seeing her grandkids, but she's a little bit cold with her. And she's like, "Oh, is this your new boyfriend?" And Pierce is like, "No, I'm a volcano guy. I'm just here to check that." And this woman, right, what was her name? Ruth. She immediately gets like, "Oh, there's nothing happening here. You're wasting your time." Like, she gets like, this is so weird to me. So this is someone who's saying, "Oh, this COVID thing's not a big deal." That's what this character is. But she's saying it before anyone's even told her there's a COVID. She's saying it like, "Wait, why are you going to the lab to even check if there's something going on? There's nothing going on." Like, he's not even told you there's a risk of anything yet. He's just got up to take some readings.
This is where I feel like the villain should have been. You know, like the mayor from Jaws. This is the sort of thing that they should have been saying, of just like, "What do you mean you want to go check out the mountain? Don't you understand how bad that is for like investments and stuff?" But instead they give it to the grandmother, and just essentially for the sole purpose of making her the inciting incident for the rest of Pierce Brosnan's plot. Yes.
She doesn't want to leave this beautiful, cabin she's got that's next to the lake, halfway up the mountain. The whole thing. So it sets this up, and ultimately they end up coming with them because the grandmother, Ruth, immediately says, "Oh, why don't we all just go up together? There's a hot spring up there." Which I guess is a nice little tangent into the little scene we got separately at the hot springs during all this tomfoolery. A young couple, in their early 20s, are just go skinny dipping in the hot spring, and they're all excited about it. My favorite part of this scene is that he's already in, and she's like, taking her clothes off and coming in, and there's a moment just after she's like sort of taking off the last of her clothes where he just goes, "Woo!" And he just like he's really excited about it. So
yeah. I mean, wouldn't you be? That's, I guess, a very attractive woman just coming into a hot spring with you. You could do anything and get some sort of infection because you're in a natural hot spring.
I mean, hot springs are a thing that people use, so I mean, it's not...
yeah, absolutely. Something I love about this sequence, though, now that you pointed out that Volcano takes place in LA, is that this couple is from LA.
They say, they mentioned it, yeah.
So no matter where they went, they were going to have a bad time.
It's funny because like, "Oh, that sure beats LA," and I'm like, I mean, yeah, for the nature side of it, but I feel like you'd get bored in the small town pretty quickly.
But yeah,
I don't know. Maybe a bit of a heavy statement.
Especially when they explicitly point out that like Dante's Peak is the only town around for like a good distance. It's the only one that's in danger of this volcano. So if you want to do anything outside the small town, you got to make a drive.
Is the town called Dante's Peak? I never caught that. If it was.
Yeah, it's called Dante's Peak.
I was thinking the town might just be Dante, but the mountain is, the peak's Dante's Peak. But
I mean, I would imagine the mountain would be called Dante, and the town would just be called, like, I don't know, Asheville or something. Will be called that by the end, but
Yeah. Regardless, fair enough. It's a good name for a town. I'm not complaining. It's fine. So yeah, so these two boil alive, right? They're kissing for a bit, they hear a noise, and then the water starts to bubble and like they start screaming, and it's very quick. It's a very rush scene, to be fair.
yes.
But it does say this. But to be fair, I do think this is a decent little setup, because when all the other characters go to this hot spring, Pierce Brosnan's there to take some readings and whatnot, obviously. The kids have got the swimming trunks and stuff on. They're getting ready to jump in, and the son's like, "Oh, I'm going to cannonball!" Like, "Hey, watch me, mum!" And he goes to run, and Pierce has been like looking at the water and being like, "Oh, something's going on here." And he like runs over and grabs the boy. He's about to jump in, and he's like, "No!" Almost like he just dove in and saved his life. And then you see like the floating bodies of these two people in there. So, you know, and this is naturally where it's like, okay, something somewhat serious has happened. At the very least, these hot springs have to be like off limits to the public now, if nothing else.
Absolutely.
But it cuts to them, you know, the bodies are getting loaded into a van, and he's on the phone with his boss saying like, yeah, okay, there's some, you know, the pH readings of the water are a bit off, and there's
a bunch of dead squirrels and trees are dying off.
Some trees were dying off. And we've got these two dead people there, so I think this is worth investigating. Like, there's, you know, I'm saying we should pay attention to this. And so the next like 10 to 20 minutes of the movie effectively boil down to Pierce Brosnan is immediately taking this seriously and wants the town to just tell the public that there's to be on alert. They might have to evacuate. There's a chance of an evacuation might occur.
Have a go bag, know your routes, and be ready for it if something happens.
And the townsfolk don't like this, but when the other scientists get there, including his boss, who's Paul, Paul hears about this meeting and immediately comes in and makes Pierce Brosnan look shit at his job in front of everyone else. Like, I feel like even if you're going to go in and say, okay, look, we shouldn't be putting them on alert yet because, you know, this has happened before in towns of like, you know, their economies went to shit because everyone got scared that one day the volcano would erupt, and it never did, and it ruined a lot of lives. So we're a lot more cautious now. So we're going to hold off for now. But he has to add on a little bit at the end of the speech where he's like, and whatever we do find, if we do give the advice to, you know, evacuate, it'll be based on science. And then he looks over at Brosnan, who's standing there, and not on opinion. And I'm like, did you have to throw him under the bus in front of all the local townsfolk? Right. It's a bit of a dick move.
I mean, yes, you're right, and it immediately marks that character as like, well, you're not making it out of this. But at the same time, it's. I mean, I kind of get it from the viewpoint of, this guy just came in and said, we definitely need to put everyone on alert. And mind you, he's not like making it a mandate either. He just brought it to a vote of like the town council or whatever. He's just saying like, this is something we should be doing. Here's my opinion as to why. Decide amongst yourselves. But then, yeah, like you said, there's one guy there who is kind of the one who's putting forward the idea of like, oh, if we say a volcano is going to blow up, then we're going to lose this contract. And I love the fact that he lifts off the contract is like, it's like $1 million and it's 800 jobs or something like that.
Oh, it's more than that. It was like $20 million. It was
$20 million? Yeah. All right. But regardless, it sounds so paltry combined with the idea of A, what money is worth today, and B, it's a town of 20,000 people. And he's like, but 800 jobs. Well, think how much our place will grow if we have 800 jobs. And it's like, by 800.
You say that, but for all we know, their unemployment number is exactly 800, and this is like the perfect opportunity to to just employ everyone up. This will solve all the town's problems.
If that's the case, I would have loved to hear them say that. They'd be like, we have 799 unemployed people, and it looks like Jimmy down at the factory is not doing so hot, so we need this now.
So yeah, it kind of like I'd kind of forgotten like a lot of the early act stuff in this movie, because like once the other scientists arrive and we've got a little team, which I did like having a team who get to bounce off of each other. That does make it a little bit more fun. It's kind of like, okay, we're going to do more tests, we're going to do this, we've got a robot to take some readings inside the volcano itself, we've got various meters, we're going to bury this thing that will measure the little mini earthquakes, and that'll give us an indication of things, and they're doing all these things. But it definitely slows down into this idea where, I mean, Pierce Brosnan is ready to just go home after this, and he's told to go on vacation, and he goes into his motel, he's upset, he's going to pack his suitcase, And then he stops and he thinks about it and he runs into the others at the bar and the boss Paul comes over and says, I thought you'd be gone by now. And he's like, you know what? I'm the best man you've got, so I'm going to stick around. And he's like, that's all fine, but, you know, everything goes through me. Like, I'm the one making these calls. And he's like, that's fine. I'll do my job.
I love this from the perspective of, obviously, you know, he's a good man. He wants to do the right thing, and he genuinely does feel like something's going to go wrong here. But I also love how it's just a little screw you to the boss of like, you know, I'm the best person here. I'm not, you know, that I have a good job with like these hunches and whatnot. And he's basically calling out his boss of like, if you're wrong, I want to be here so that I can clean up your mess.
And to be fair, when things go down later, Paul does say, for what it's worth, you were right and I was wrong.
That's the one part that made me think that Paul was actually maybe going to survive this, even after they so clearly signaled his death, was that he immediately, the moment the evidence shows up, he's like, all right, I'm all in. Let's listen to Pierce Brosnan.
One of the things that makes this movie feel so Hollywood, and Brosnan does point out that sometimes you get these like lulls before the big thing happens that makes it look safe, but it is almost like the volcano itself is going out of its way to like make him look like he's wrong. There's like a 20-minute portion of this movie where the readings are showing that everything's normal, all the mini quakes are what they should be, everything's well within parameters, and if anything, it's dying down. And they're like, "Hey, we need to go home. There's nothing more we can do here. There's nothing imminent threat." And I'm like, "This is a disaster movie. We know it's going to go off, right? It's going to happen." So all I can think of is like, oh, it's almost like the volcano is like making him look bad, like it's messing with him, and that almost personal like vendetta to give more drama out of this, so that it looks like everything's fine until that moment where things get really bad. Is almost comical, I suppose, to an extent.
Oh yeah, no. It obviously we encountered that in the '70s disaster, where every once in a while you'd have a disaster that felt like it was chasing the main character. It felt like it was something that was going after them specifically, and it always feels Hollywood. It always feels like, okay, this is not a disaster that is just a naturally occurring event or something that happens where they have to deal with it. It's no, you're being hunted down by this disaster and you need to learn to deal with it. And I think that this is possibly the most Hollywood I've seen out of anything we've done yet, because they may as well just have a little like what could go wrong sort of button, where it's the moment anyone says anything of like by the time we hit the third act, he specifically points at a screen and says, "You wait, don't explode yet." And then 30 seconds later, boom. And it's like, all right, well, may as well.
I mean, honestly, it makes me think of like supernatural movies where like a character believes they're seeing a ghost, but no one else sees it, so they think they're crazy. And they keep saying, no, it's really there. But the ghost is almost like intentionally making them look crazy by never showing itself to anyone else. That's what this volcano is like with Pierce Brosnan's character.
Yeah, and they even do a thing where we'll go through the whole leg breaking scene, but they even do a thing where he specifically says like, this is clearly signs that something is happening. We need to pay attention to it. And the boss gives in and says like, okay, we're going to stay here for a week. And if we get anything else, so be it. And of course, time skip, we don't see the whole week play out. But once the week is done, he straight up says nothing happened. There was literally nothing else happening that entire week, which just puts it all the more into perspective that like, yeah, no, it's just dicking with him.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, the team's in here, and this is where we get the scenes where Linda Hamilton brings them all coffee, and our one man's only characteristic is that he's really excited that he's been brought coffee.
I want to know where this character began in the 90s, because he is present in every single one of the disaster movies I've ever seen. He's the mousy little, like, energetic guy who has some social cues that just don't quite fit in. I've seen him in every one of these movies.
Yeah, and honestly, the others don't really have. I mean, there's the guy who like sort of like controls the robot. He's the one that breaks his leg. We'll talk about that in a minute. There's a woman there who she compares something to Pompeii at one line of dialogue. That's about it.
Boy, she sure is the woman.
I mean, she is. She doesn't really have a character. Like that's basically all she is. The only thing that they're really there for, other than just to serve the plot of like, oh, these are other scientists looking into things, is they're basically just there to, well, maybe not the boss, but the rest of them are all basically just there to sort of glance at like Pierce Brosnan when Linda Hamilton's around and be like, oh, there's something here.
Yeah.
There's a spark. And that's in the town as well. There was like a random woman who like this was like earlier on when they're in the car before the kids are even there, where this woman in the town like sort of sees Linda Hamilton and sort of comes over to talk. And when she notices Pierce Brosnan sitting in the passenger seat, like her sunglasses come down and she's like giving him the eye, like, oh, something scandalous going on here.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. One thing, sorry, I just remembered this. I wanted to say it earlier when we were talking about the cast. The little girl they got to play the daughter, top tier casting, just because she looks just like Linda Hamilton's daughter. Like, I fully believe there was a family resemblance there. The son, not so much. I don't know who the hell he is, but the daughter looks spot on like a young Linda Hamilton.
Yeah, but the son's got the hair curtains. You know, that's very 90s.
The 90s middle part. God. Yeah. You know what? I'm gonna do that for the thumbnail. I'm gonna put in a middle part just to get it full 90s.
Oh, good luck with that.
Yeah.
I don't think I've got the choice in the matter at this point, but very good.
That's fair.
Yeah, so we get this scene where they go up to the volcano and like they're on the edge, but they're sending in this robot. One bit of important thing for setup later, and they don't even really explain what it is early on, but there's like an actual yellow block on the back of the robot, which the guy controlling the robot says is causing a lot of weight problems and it's struggling to walk because of it. So they rip it off and say, well, don't no one tell NASA, because NASA gave them this tech to like experiment with. It ends up being an important plot detail for the very end of the movie, but they don't really go into it too much here. But regardless,
I think the only thing they say is like it's a transmitter. That's literally all they say. NASA's running experiments and it's a transmitter, and then they just throw it aside and hope you remember it's there as a Chekhov's gun.
But the robot's leg still messes up, but it's like 20 feet down into the side of the volcano, so it's not even like it matters that much. So our man goes down to try and fix it, and he even goes off rope at one point, which seemed like such a stupid decision.
Like, he's literally doing it as everyone else, even on his team, is saying, don't do that. Why would you do that? And his only justification is, oh, it'll make it easier to get around the front of this thing. It's like, I feel like there are other ways there, especially as you were coming down this mountainside, you already trip and stumbled like 4 times. So why would you do this? And the answer is because we've only had one heart-pounding scene before the explosion. Here's our second.
This was the scene that felt very forced to me so that we could have like a dramatic action scene, because obviously when a little mini earthquake happens and some rocks come down and he gets trapped and his leg's broken, we have to have this big scene of the helicopter coming in and Pierce Brosnan like straps himself to him and they get lifted out of the volcano on the helicopter, and it really did feel orchestrated because we need to have something quote-unquote exciting happen before the eruption, because the eruption's not happening till close to an hour in, right? Maybe a little bit earlier, but like...
It's like exactly the midpoint of the movie.
So we have to have something exciting in the first half. And this is, I guess, what's different about the 70s movies, is the 70s movies wouldn't feel the need to do that. They'd be like, no, you wait. It'll be worth it. You just... It's coming, right? Whereas here, like, no, we have to have some excitement early on where someone's in danger just to, like, sell some stakes and whatnot. So...
Look, we accept that people might actually walk out of the theater in the 90s for whatever reason.
So, I mean, he ends up more... He's got some crutches. He's fine. You know, he's just got a broken leg. Not the end of the world. But this is like...
You say not the end of the world, but this is what sets Pierce Brosnan as like hardcore, like, this is it. We went down into that crater. We saw a bunch of stuff. There was a mini earthquake there. This is definitely going to blow, and we need to get a lock on this immediately.
But, of course, the boss man's like, nope, don't believe you. There's no evidence for this. And it gets to the point where it's like, okay, even Pierce has to accept that they're going home the next day, right? The week's passed, nothing else has happened. We just have to accept and move on. But that makes Linda Hamilton sad because they've been kind of bonding. She had him over for dinner and he was showing the kids like magic tricks and stuff. Like there's a whole little bit, right?
They specifically have him set up dominoes first. Like there's a thing where he sets up a thing of dominoes going down. And I thought for sure that was foreshadowing for like some later event. Like, oh, you know, this thing's going to hit this thing and it's going to be like a trail of dominoes. No, not at all. It's just they wanted to show dominoes.
It was just one of the things he was showing the kids.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. But they're at the bar. It's his final night there. He's leaving the next morning, so Linda Hamilton's getting close to him. He walks her home, and it gets intimate. They're getting close, and they're clearly like feeling things for each other. And he's like, "Hey, do you think I'll ever be in Portland?" And she's like, "Well, I'm kind of the mayor here. Like, I'm kind of busy, so I don't think so." So they clearly want to see more of each other, and they're about to kiss. And she says, "It's been a while since I've been, with someone, right?"
Yeah,
implying that that's where this is going. But they're both realizing this is leading to sex, and he has the line which you wanted to get to.
Yes. He leans down. Their faces are just centimeters apart from each other, and he's like, "Well, they say it's like riding a bicycle. Once you learn, you never really forget." And I'm like, could you be a little less sexy right now? Because that is like the worst come on I've ever heard. I mean, at this point, they're obviously already going to bone, so he could say anything. He could literally just say, like, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. And it's like, yeah, sure, whatever. But it's just such a bad line. Someone thought that was genuinely sexy, and I don't know why.
Because he's hoping she's going to ride him.
Yeah, that's the thing. If he really leaned into the word ride, then I could believe it. If he's like, well, it's a lot like riding a bicycle.
Yeah, they get interrupted though because her daughter says, "Mom, she wants some water," and this is where the movie turns because they go to the water and it looks it's brown, it's coming out funny looking, and he looks at it, he's like, "Where's the town's water supply?" And he goes and checks the water supply. And this is his smoking gun. So he rushes down to the motel where all the scientists are staying. He gets his boss and he's like, "Run the tap." He's like, "There's your proof. There's your evidence." And it's like, shit, this is happening.
Yep. Because I think a part of what they were saying before is to like evidence why it wasn't happening was because they were looking for some sulfuric dioxide or something, but nothing was coming up. And then as soon as this happens, they realize it's just leached into the groundwater. That's why they couldn't get a reading on it. So
and it's turning the water into acid. More on that later.
Yes, good lord, that sequence.
More on that later. So this is where they're all sort of rushing around, and they call a town meeting. Linda Hamilton gets on the local news. I'm shocked a town this size has a local news channel, to be honest, but she gets on the news station.
I mean, I have to feel like there's something, even if it's only for emergencies, there has to be something there in place.
Yeah, probably. I guess I've never really thought about a small town having to do this.
Yeah,
but
I mean, that's my thing nowadays is with everybody, nobody has a TV turned to actual cable anymore. So the only way people are going to get alerts is through their phones. And I still want to see how that's rolled out. I don't feel like I've ever actually seen a massive wide-scale emergency broadcast on phones yet.
I have. It was a test. It wasn't like a real thing, but they did like a test of it. So I did. And intentionally, I think it's built into the phones so that like the sound it makes is unique to that. It doesn't make like your ringtone sound or anything like that. It does its own thing. That I'm assuming everyone's hearing the exact same thing, so it's an emergency system thing. But
that's fair.
Yeah. So the motel owner who sees this on TV and like comes running into the scientists who are staying at his motel and like, "Hey, what's this on the TV about the volcano? I just put up a new sign. What's going to happen to my sign?"
And that's important. Honest to God, that is the last selfish, quote unquote, thing that happens in this movie, where he's just like, what's going to happen to my sign? Because after this point, everything that the USGS says, they just 100% go with and nobody's fighting against.
Yeah. So they're actually at the town meeting and Pierce Brosnan's trying to explain that this is a precaution. It's not a guarantee it'll happen. And the volcano literally erupts while he's making that speech, which I do appreciate to an extent, because I was a little bit worried that when he said it was a precaution, that some people would start saying, "Oh, so we don't have to then, right? We don't have to actually take this seriously." The fact that it happens while they're there inside like the high school gymnasium or wherever they are, kind of made it easy to just sort of, okay, we can get on with the plot now. They go outside and they see the big smoke plumes coming out of the volcano. It's like, oh shit, it's go time. This is happening. And this is where we get a lot of the miniature work of like the some of the roads like crumbling and some buildings like falling apart. And the sign, motel guy's sign comes down. Poor old man.
I I'm sure his hotel is going to miss a lot of business specifically because that sign is gone.
I mean, the rest of the hotel is most definitely flattened, and there's no one left in this town after it, so I feel like his business was going to hell anyway, but...
But the sign, though.
The sign, yes. Well, it was a nice sign. He had like a nice new neon sign. He was very proud of it. Like, I get it. He's...
I mean, to be fair, once they brought attention to the sign, when it was coming down, I actually noticed it. I was like, that is a nice sign. I feel bad for the guy.
I almost felt like it was meant to be like a payoff to a joke to me. Like, it was like, they set up the sign, so when you see it go down, you kind of chuckle a little bit.
Well, that was one thing that I thought was very strange, was during the gymnasium scene, we see that politician guy, the one who was saying like, oh, but what about the jobs? There's another guy standing next to him who says, all right, well, screw this. I'm getting out of here now.
That's the millionaire.
Right, but like, did we ever see him prior to this?
Yeah, we saw him at the ceremony. Linda Hamilton introduced him and said, stand up, and he waved at the crowd. So we did see him. We did see him.
All right, fair enough. I guess I just blanked on that part, because I thought this was the first time we were seeing him, and it's like, they're assuming a lot of the audience to be able to remember that this is the guy who had the job. It's
like the dog. Him and the dog. They do like one quick introduction that's very easy to forget, and then we're supposed to remember who they are. Like, I mean, not that you have to remember who the dog is, but you know what I mean. Like, just the fact that they have a dog. So yeah, the destruction is good. Destruction is entertaining. They do this thing where there's a lot. And this was in the prologue as well, but there's a lot of driving around with like thick like smoke and ash and other stuff to make it like so. Obviously, Pierce Brosnan's truck has got a lot of lights on it. He's even got like a snorkel thing in case they have to drive in water. That's pointed out, but he's got a vehicle that's prepared for rough conditions. That's kind of the point, right? So he gets away with doing a lot of things with a vehicle that other people can't. Because at one point later on, he like drives to go through the water, and some cars like behind him think, "Oh, that's a great idea. We'll do that too." And he's like, "Oh, they're never going to make it. Like their cars are just normal cars."
Yeah, which is that's already at the point where they are heading up the mountain, though, right?
That's after they find out where the kids have went. Yeah, they're already like up. They're already at like the little store cafe that Linda Hamilton also runs.
Right, which baffles me then what those cars think they were doing, because they turn off of the main road to follow this guy as he's heading up the mountain. Like, that seems like the opposite direction that you want to go, guys.
Yes. So one of the big things in the movie to get the rest of the plot going is that Linda Hamilton tries to phone, this is before they even come to do the big town hall meeting, Linda Hamilton tries to phone the grandmother to see if she'll come down, and she refuses. She's like, I'm not leaving my house, nothing's happening, this is a bunch of baloney. She's ignorant right to the very bitter end. The kids who are left back at the diner / house, because I think her house is literally just over the diner.
I think so. I think they showed them like walking up the stairs, and that's just where the home was.
The kids are left there, and they try phoning the grandmother again, and this is set up to show that the kids are concerned. So when Pierce Brosnan and Linda Hamilton get to the house again, looking for the kids, there's a note that says, "We went to go get grandma, don't be mad." And cut to the kids driving in these horrible conditions where the sun's just going for it. He's just going through the ash. It's not a big deal to him.
The sun has been blotted out from the sky. He doesn't know how to turn the windshield wipers on any faster, so the ash is just coating up on it. And and then I think it's the daughter at one point makes the beautiful line of, "Maybe this was a bad idea."
I was going to say, he has it easy because it's America, so it's probably like an automatic at least, and that'll make it easy for him. But the daughter does say at one point, "Do you know all the gears?" Which does suggest that it might not be automatic. So. Yeah.
I mean, on the other hand, I don't think he's going to be speeding up this mountain either. I think he's safe in first gear pretty much the whole way there.
Oh, very possibly. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. As a kid, though, he's an idiot. Maybe he was fast is better. Fast is life.
That's he's going 20 miles per hour. He cranks it into sixth, and then all of a sudden the engine explodes.
Because if I tried to drive a car right now, I guarantee you the thing that would probably the biggest obstacle would be stalling the engine because of the changing the gears. Because I'm in the UK and all the cars are manual.
And I'm in the US, which if I was put into a manual, it would be the exact same issue.
It'd be the main hold up you have, this is like the big plot contrivance to like get the movie going, is that these kids take the car on their own up to the grandmother's cabin, and that forces Pierce Brosnan and Linda Hamilton to have to go up there as well. And as they're going up, things are getting worse. Like literally trees and rocks like block the road right behind them as they're going up, so they can't go back down the road. They're trapped up there.
Yep.
So
one thing that they have is the pilot of the helicopter that got them out of the crater earlier on when the leg was broken. He is apparently super greedy. And what we glossed over was as they were trying to get the bodies, like the Pierce Brosnan and the other guy out of the volcano, he's trying to renegotiate his rates right then because he's like, well, it's an emergency. I can charge more. And then they just give in and give him whatever money he wants to get them out of there.
Yeah, he's like a rental pilot. Like, he's just like hired to do like a flight, which I thought was interesting because I feel like, isn't there like some sort of member of the Coast Guard that would like come in for emergencies? So why were you paying for a private helicopter? And to be honest, it wouldn't even be that ridiculous to think that this team might even just have their own helicopter and pilot, given what they do.
I mean, I would think that I'm pretty sure that the USGS is a governmental function. I feel like the government would have pre-existing contracts in place of like, you get this amount, you can't negotiate.
But this comes back here because the politician and the rich guy pay the pilot an obscene amount of money to fly them out. And like the scientists like see this and they're like, no, what are you crazy? You can't fly in this. This is a terrible, you can't fly in these conditions. This is an eruption. In fact, we have like the real world present day example for this because remember when some volcano went up in Iceland like a decade ago and it was like, hey, no planes are allowed to fly in like half the world, like the entire like Atlantic stretch of the planet. You cannot fly. All flights are cancelled for like 3-4 weeks, whatever. I can't remember exactly, but like everything was grounded. People were like, hey, you live in the US and you're in the UK and you're waiting for your flight home. Well, you're here for like 2 more weeks because it's not safe to fly until then. Like, so this helicopter is trying to fly through this ash, and would you believe it ends up just plummeting right in... It actually lands in front of the truck that Pierce Brosnan and Linda Hamilton are in, but it luckily for them, it bounces over them. Like, there's such force that it sort of catapults itself.
Which I question the physics of that. I feel like the light metal that the helicopter has to be made out of to fly would not be able to bounce, but so be it. I'll take it.
Yeah, then it lands in a building. And Pierce Brosnan like calls down the radio. Hey, helicopter went down, send up like a fire team. And I'm like, dude, they're definitely dead. Why are you even sending in paramedics? Like
well, the way that scene played out, I felt like he was like, I am doing the thing that I am trained to do, but I feel like his tone of voice kind of sells to the team like, you don't gotta do that. It's not gonna matter.
I mean, Linda Hamilton feels upset that they're kind of abandoning it, but he's like, no, we'll focus on your kids. The important thing for us to find is your kids. Like, the emergency services will deal with them. There's no emergency services coming up this mountain now. Are you kidding me? They're just helping people evacuate.
I think they explicitly said at this part, too, because I think it was just as the volcano was erupting, is that they said that the National Guard wasn't going to be able to show up until the next morning. So until then, they're all on their own regardless.
Because we see that. We see, like, some soldiers show up the next day. Not that they really do anything with them, to be honest. They're just kind of there.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of the necessity of, like, if you want funding, like, you know, military stuff, you have to be able to show the military at least showing up and doing their job a little bit. So maybe they got a little bit of grant money from them.
Maybe, yeah. So they get to the house. The kids are there with the grandmother. The grandmother is immediately like, why are you looking at me like this is my fault? But, you know, and Pierce Brosnan is like, look, we can't stay here. Go grab some stuff. We have to go. We have to find a way out of here. And luckily they just finished like packing their bags and coming down the stairs when lava comes through the wall and starts pouring into the cabin.
I don't hate it because it's silly. If anything, I like it because it's silly. But the movie, up till now, with all this stuff going on, has been playing it very straight. And the fact that the lava is targeting this one house, and it's so perfectly timed for when they were able to go, I just groaned at that. Like, as soon as the lava started tearing apart their house, I'm like, really? Nobody noticed that? Nobody cared? All right, whatever.
Well, it's not even that nobody cared. It's that Pierce Brosnan's character should have been more aware that this was impending. Like he says, yeah, we have to go now. We have to rush. It doesn't feel like he's aware that the building's about to be consumed by lava. It feels like he's just in a rush. And when they get outside, there's lava like flowing next to the house that's already much further down. So it does feel like oddly, like just perfect to like give this scare inside the house kind of thing.
Right. And that's the thing is lava can move very quickly. Like it can essentially flow as fast as any liquid. So the fact that they're caught off guard by it, I can accept that. But then they should be dead. Like you can't just be caught off guard by it and then also manage to outrace it. There's no way that it works both ways.
Yeah. So they can go down the road. The only option they have is to get in this little boat that's got a little single motor at the back.
Yep.
So,
and this is where they lose the dog.
Yeah.
The dog does not make it to the boat. Who knows where he is? He's probably dead.
Spoiler, the dog somehow survived. But we'll get to that.
That's the biggest somehow, I think, in movie history. I can accept a lot of things, but that dog surviving doesn't make any goddamn sense.
So they're in the boat, and they're noticing the fish are all dead, and then Pierce Brosnan realizes, oh, this water's basically acid now, so everyone get their feet up just in case some water's coming in the bottom of the boat. And that's all fine. But when they're, like, you know, almost to the other side, the motor stops working because the acid has eaten through the rudder. So it's like, shit, what do we do? We're going to sink. And Pierce Brosnan starts wrapping a jacket around his hand so he can try and, like, oar them with his arm to, like... So I always remembered this scene because it's the silliest scene in the movie, and it's the big, like, over-the-top dramatic thing where the grandmother gets out of the boat, sacrificing herself to, like, push the boat along the last few feet to get to the other side and get into land. I think what I did not remember, though, that really caught me off guard this time is how close they really were. I felt like it was like a good, like, maybe like 10 feet she had to, like, pull the boat. So, because, you know, the idea that they were never going to make it naturally. But they're so close, it's just like a final few feet that I'm like, I feel like they could have maybe even just jumped to the dock at that distance. It wasn't that far.
Well, also, here's the weird part for me, is that Pierce Brosnan, he wraps this jacket around his hand. His jacket's not waterproof. His jacket's not like a windbreaker or anything like that. It's absorbing the acid into it, and he's, like, continues oaring this boat for a solid 2 minutes. Meanwhile, the grandma's in there waist deep for, like, what, 30 seconds? Not even?
Not even that,
and somehow she's dead by the end of this. It takes a little bit of time, but she is succumbing to acid burns. Meanwhile, Pierce Brosnan's hand, perfectly fine. No problems at all.
It wouldn't have been realistic, but it would have at least been nice for his arm to be a little bit damaged from that.
Right.
You know, if
I would
nothing
like
else.
it either one side or the other. Either neither of them take significant damage, or they both take somewhat damage. Like, because he has doused his arm in this acid for a solid 2 minutes. Something should happen.
Yep. But they get to a car and hotwire after some walking, and they're back. So it's basically just a race down the mountain as all this, like, dirty water filled with debris and, like, twigs and, you know, rocks and whatnot is coming down the side of the mountain.
I think the grandma dies in between there.
She dies on, like, the path before they get to the vehicle. Yeah, they're still walking when she dies.
This is by the time the next morning comes around, and we get the team down that's still in town calls up over the, like, little walkie-talkie they got, and they make it very clear everyone in town has been evacuated.
Yep.
They managed to get everybody out. They are the last group out in a bunch of convoy Humvees and such, making their way across the only bridge that leads out of town.
Yeah, I think there was more than one earlier, but we saw, like, the highway crumble when the first eruption kind of started. So it's like, okay, so this is the only bridge out of here now. And so I guess we're talking about this scene now, because this scene had the other kind of, like, over-the-top funny death, which was complete with, if it wasn't...
Oh, God.
If it wasn't the Wilhelm scream, it was definitely something that was like the Wilhelm scream.
It was the Wilhelm.
Yeah.
It's marked on IMDb trivia as the Wilhelm scream.
Yeah, so... You can't use the Wilhelm scream in what's supposed to be a serious death scene. You just can't. You cannot do it. But
oh, God.
Yeah, so basically there's two, like, military vehicles that have got most of the scientists in it, but the boss is in the van, and he's, like, last across the bridge. And the bridge is already broken apart by the time they get to the other side, but they're close enough that the two military vehicles just kind of, like, jump over the gap and they're fine, right? But his van starts to get stuck, and they're all telling him to get out and just jump, you know, over and, like, come with them. But he waits too long, try to get the van going again. So the bridge is just kind of, like, at almost, like, 30, 40 degree angle at this point. And he's like, he gets out finally, he's hanging onto the railing, but it's too far away now. He can't make the jump. And he just looks at them like, I know I'm dead. and then the water hits the bridge even harder, and he just goes flying with the bridge. And as he goes flying, you just hear the ah.
I love that approximation of the Wilhelm scream, and I'm going to use it in everything now. But no, yeah, it's such a whiplash for me because all of the special effects in this sequence look great. The fact that they managed to like make the miniatures and like these convoys jumping over here, it looks so good for what is feasibly a bunch of special effects just layered on top of each other. It feels like they actually shot it. And then they put in a Wilhelm scream, and it just robs all tension immediately. It's a joke now. Oh God, I the moment that happened, I was so done with this movie. Like, that was what broke me in terms of like, oh, okay, so you're just not taking anything seriously. Got it.
And for the record, I thought even just the way he went flying was already a little bit funny. The scream was kind of the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it definitely deflated things, and they all stand there in horror. Their boss has just been killed, and they're like, "Oh no!"
That strikes me as the scene that, like, during the premiere, the actor who played the boss is like, "Really?" Because obviously he didn't know Wilhelm scream was going to be there.
Of course, yeah.
I feel like he would have been disappointed in how his character died.
So meanwhile, the family, I'll just call them that for short. They're in the truck, and they're like trying to go through this rough water and stuff. They eventually get to this part where, like, lava's went through some of the ground, it seems like, so it's all burned, and they're like, looking at it, and she's like, hey, like, can we even drive across that? And he's like, honestly, I don't know, but there's no other option, we have to go across it. So he backs the car up, and then so he's at a decent speed when he's going across it. And I did like this moment in the sense of, like, I do love the idea that this burned ground is so hot that it's just setting the wheels on fire, and like the tires are just melting as they're going across, and they're just kind of hoping to get to the other side. Yeah. I like that part, especially since after this scene's over and we see them like driving into town. Like, yeah, the car's like hobbling along. There's like basically no tires left. They're just kind of churning along.
You got the outer rim, but like that's it. That's all that's there.
But the big Hollywood moment though that makes it a lot cheesier is after they're like halfway through, they go, wait a minute. It's her dog! The dog's on a rock! And he's stranded!
You say it, and it sounds so stupid the way you say it, but, like, it's even stupider the way they do it in the movie, somehow. It's stupider than, hey, look, that's our dog! Like, it's just... because, again, it's the same scenario. The special effects of this sequence of, like, the tires popping and, like, the sides of the truck on fire look so good. And then halfway across, is that Ruffy? Is that our dog? Oh my God, grab him, Mom. So
we get this thing where, like, you know, it's a pickup truck with like a bay at the back, right? Mm-hmm. So she gets out the back and is like, oh, the dog's going to have to jump. We've only got one chance as we go past. And she's like, come on, boy, come on. So we get the dramatic dog jumping into the back of the truck scene for a feel-good moment as they're on their way down the mountain. They're not even across the fiery field yet. And Pierce Brosnan's already just like shaking his head like, "The son of a bitch, he did it," sort of thing. It's like, dude, let's focus on the more important things here. I will say, like, so I don't remember if it's before or after they go into the mine. I think it might even be before, but there's like a shot like going through the town and it's just like covered in ash and everything just looks before, right? And it's kind of like post-apocalyptic. And what's so funny about this is that the thought I had looking at this, and I'm not just making this reference because Linda Hamilton's here, it looked like one of the opening shots of T2 as it's going past all like the debris of like showing the post-apocalypse. And I'm like, man, this is giving me vibes of that. That's what it looks like. I want to rewatch that scene now, but overlay a da-da-dun-da-dun music to it. Oh, dear. So basically, he goes into where the scientists were living in the motel. He picks up the whatever the thing was, the ELF, the NASA transmission device, because he realizes they can't get out of the town, so they're going to have to hunker down. But he looks at the computer, which is still taking readings, and it's showing like arrows coming from the volcano saying, "Imminent eruption, big things happening soon. Brace yourselves." They're specifically showing like this isn't going to be one of those pansy ass eruptions where it's like a dribble of lava coming down and nothing else. This is the explosive one. This is the explosives. Rocks are going to be flying through the air. Remember the one that killed your love of your life? Going to be more of that. So maybe if they brought that back up at this point, I would have cared a little bit about the love of his life. But hey, wouldn't you know it? We'd never mention it again. So yeah, there was a scene where he told her about her, but this was like the first night he had dinner with her, like after he was entertaining the kids.
Before everything else. As soon as he mentions it, and she's just like, oh, touchy subject, and then never brought up again.
Yeah, right after she talks about how her husband was a dickbag who just left and she doesn't know where he is.
Yep.
So,
which makes you wonder, like, how does Ruth feel that she's got any room to, like, be angry at the character that Linda Hamilton plays? Like, this entire time she's pissy with her and, like, they don't have the best relationship. But if the son runs off and, like, neither of them know where he is, clearly he's in the wrong there.
Oh,
right?
yeah, for sure. I mean, Linda Hamilton even says at one point she won't admit it, but Ruth doesn't know where he is either. And like, it's like, yeah, clearly he's just an asshole then. Like, what?
Yeah. So you two should be bonding over the fact that this person that you both love is a dick.
I don't know. Mother's love and all that, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess.
Anyway, so the eruption is starting. They're on the run, and the only option they have is, remember that mine from the start of the movie the son was in? That might shield them from everything going on. So he just drives the truck through the doors into the mine, and that's basically it for a bit, where they have a little moment where he's like promising them, hey, we'll get out of here, we'll be fine. The son's luckily got a few snacks in here, so they've actually got a little bit of food for the day or two they're going to have to wait.
Going back to the opening of, like, you just knocked on your son's door, and, like, that didn't even knock, just threw it open.
Yeah.
I was expecting the exact same thing here, where it's like, okay, this is a room where a bunch of teenage boys hang out away from the rest of society, and Pierce Brosnan saying, hey, why don't you take us to your little clubhouse thing? I expected the son to turn around and be like, let me go in first and just clear out some things, and then you guys can come in.
Yeah, just some naked posters on the walls, whatever else.
Just take that off. Ignore the pile of tissues over there in the corner. That's something else entirely.
It makes you sneeze a lot when you're down here. That's all that is.
Yeah, it's dusty. It's really dusty down here.
Yeah. But this is where he sits down with them and says, like, we'll get out of here. It's like, hey, have you guys ever been deep fishing? And they're like, no. I was like, yeah, me neither. How about when we get out of here, we all go to Florida together? Because I was thinking this actually at the start of the scene. I'm like, Linda Hamilton saying, she can't leave and go to Portland because, like, she's got so much going on here. I'm like, well, the town doesn't exist anymore, so your house is gone, so you kind of need to go and live with him now.
I wonder how that works. Like, if you're the mayor, if you are in an elected position for a town, and the town is quite literally wiped off the map, do you still have, like, the position? Are you still the mayor until the term is up?
I think if you want to help, like, if you're going to try and rebuild it, although to be honest, why would you rebuild a town where a volcano might erupt again? That just seems like a stupid idea.
Well, what are the odds it happens twice, Pete?
Well, not anytime soon, but like in 1,000 years' time, when your great grandkids are around, they might be doomed. So
that's fair.
This seems like a silly idea, but yeah. So it's like, okay, fine. He's making this nice story to make them all feel better, and Linda Hamilton's like, yeah, that sounds great, Harry. Let's go fishing together. My kids need a new dad, and you're up to the task apparently. So let's do it. But he's like, oh shit, the elf, the yellow box that is going to transmit. I left it in the car. I need to go back and get it. And just as he goes back and does that, there's a cave in, and they get separated. He gets like an arm broken. And he gets to the truck, but even the truck's starting to get like crushed in, and he's like sort of squeezing. And there's like a little payoff here. I think it was a payoff because earlier in the movie, the guy who works with the robot, they make a joke about how he always just kicks it to get it working. Like there's nothing technical he's doing. He just kicks it and it starts working. There's a payoff here where Pierce Brosnan can't get to the he's trapped. He can't actually get his hands to the robot or the elf thing. So he just kicks it and it turns on. And I'm like, was that meant to be like a joke? Was that meant to be like a callback to the kicking it makes it work?
Absolutely. They 100% leaned in on that.
Anyway, so a day passes, and that guy with the other scientist like walks into a room, sees a light blinking, and goes, wait a minute, how long's that light been blinking? Oh, NASA, you beautiful bastards! And then cut to, an excavation team, paramedics pulling out Pierce Brosnan from the truck. And I was thinking to myself, do you know what? He was in there for like 24 plus hours. I can't imagine like how horrific and scary that 24 hours was, where he's just trapped there.
Every time that the truck like creaks a little bit or something like that, I would just piss myself. Yeah. Like 100%.
He should be like traumatized coming out of there, but it just obviously it's the happy ending now, so we have to
They try to load him up into a truck and he's just like, no, no, I'm not getting in that truck. I'm gonna walk. Bye. I'm leaving.
I'm fine. The only other bit of drama, of course, he's worried that the wife and kids, as it were, might not be okay. But they come out, they're fine. They all hug. The hugs hug him. The kids hug him, is what I meant to say. And then they finally kiss. The adults, not him and the kids.
The kids finally kiss, which really changes the tone of the movie.
And his scientist friends all go whistling and like, oh, he's finally kissing a woman. Oh, he's found love again. Also, the boss man died. We're sad about that for 2 seconds, but kissing Linda Hamilton, that takes precedent. So
I was gonna say they bring it up. It's just like, where's Paul? It's like, he didn't make it, but he got to watch the explosion and it was really cool.
They basically say that. Yeah, they say he got to see the show. Which, yeah. But
I mean, if it's one of those things where like it goes back to the way that he described his not wife that died, where it's like she was really into volcanoes, and that's kind of the reason that she got killed, is that she stuck around a bit too long where she wasn't supposed to.
That said, though, like this guy's obviously he's the boss, so he's been in this line of business for a long time. He's a upper middle-aged dude. I'm sure he's seen one before. Like I don't think this is that special.
I mean, you say that, but how many spectacular, like, explosive volcanic eruptions are there? A lot of them are just kind of like a dribble out sort of magma leak.
Yeah, that's fair. There's a proper violent volcano eruption.
That's one other thing that was going on. Sorry. With the, as they were driving into the mine, it's as the big explosion was going off, and all the kids, there's the giant billowing clouds coming out of it of ash and stuff. And the kids are just asking, like, what's that? And Pierce Brosnan says, that is a pyroclastic cloud. And I'm like, this is not the educational point of the movie, guys. I don't know why you're trying to explain. Like, what kid is going to be asking what that? It's the eruption. That's just what it is. There's nothing else about it. I don't understand what's confusing here.
There's also a shot at one point where it looks up at the sky and there's just like lightning like happening horizontally in the ash clouds or whatever it is we're
right
calling that. So yeah, I was going to make a joke a minute ago about how he's going to erupt into Linda Hamilton later, but you cut me off.
You know what? I'm happy I did that.
That's why he likes volcanoes, because he's a man, and as we've said, from about 12, 13 years on, that's all men can think about is the eruptions.
We enjoy seeing this large phallic peak coming out of the earth, shooting things into the sky.
Okay. That's the movie. I mean, the only thing is that the camera lingers on like the aftermath of like the now dormant peak again. Like, it's like all settled, like everything's covered in ash, but it's just sitting there quietly now as the credits play. And there you go. So that's the movie. James Bond and Sarah Connor go off to have a new life together.
Yeah. I mean, I would love this movie a lot more if it was pitched like that. James Bond and Sarah Connor fight the earth. Done. Love it.
I mean, if this was Sarah Connor and she was like going around with why do they need shotguns in this case? Not like there's human villains to worry about for the most part.
That makes it even better. Just shooting the lava flow as it gets too close. That's the best.
Oh no, you have like Mr. Freeze gun. Like you have like one of those and say, we can freeze it. We'll freeze the lava. I'm like, I don't know, it's pretty hot. I mean, how much do you need to lower the temperature to freeze it?
Sub-Zero.
Oh dear. There you go. That is peak. I guess that's the movie. Look, it's not a bad watch. It's an easy enough time. I think, especially if you grew up in the 90s and you've got a sort of affection for how they did this type of thing. But it's absolutely a dumb Hollywood blockbuster. It has a couple of notable cast members that make it an easier time. But it does have characters making some dumb decisions. It does have some really contrived Hollywood nonsense of like the volcano seems to be messing with them intentionally. But it does have good practical effects, and most of those sequences are fun to watch. So
I mean, I agree. I as much as it is exactly what I think the formula of these movies are going to be, and we'll see how much the future installments here stray from that. I do think that this one at least managed to occasionally dip into the silliness of like how schlocky it really is. But I do think that it kind of had trouble straddling the line because the special effects were actually really, really good. And so you've got this problem where everything that you're viewing is very realistic and horrific, but then they'll just do the stupidest thing immediately afterwards and just rob the scene of any tension.
Yeah. So, I will say this. I'll make you excited for Volcano. You know how the grandmother does this big whole sacrifice scene? There is a much, much more amazingly silly sacrifice in Volcano, and I cannot wait. I cannot wait for that.
All right. I'll look forward to, I'll place my bets as soon as the movie starts. I'll try to guess which one it is, and I'll see if I'm correct.
I cannot wait. You got a young Don Cheadle in that movie and everything.
Oh, all right.
Cool. There's a whole bunch of things. Anyway, we should be rating Dante's Peak. So,
sure.
What are you giving Dante's Peak?
I mean, it's around a 5. I'm trying to figure out whether it's above or below, because like I said, even when I just finished this movie, I don't know if I liked it. I don't know if coming out of it, whether or not I thought it was a decent movie. I think I am going to bump it just like half a point above a 5, so 5.5. Just because the special effects are genuinely very good. I think that is well worth the price of admission just to see how well they're done here. And it does get like stupid fun at points. There's no point where I think it's actually just a schlocky, silly film, like they lean into it. But I think despite them trying not to lean into it, it still gets there at points. So 5.5, but I would not give it a 6. I think that's silly to say it would get that high.
I'm giving it a 6.
All right, you're a silly man.
I think it just about scrapes to okay. I think there's enough entertainment value. It's an easy enough watch. Like I said, the special effects are good. I think if I was being more strictly objective, which I don't think you can always be when you're talking about movies, because it's art and entertainment after all, it's, there's some subjectivity. But I think it about gets to a 6 because honestly, I can't say that I didn't have some fun watching it, and I still do, even though I've seen it before. It's not my favorite of the bunch by any means, but it's a fine, entertaining time, even with all of its faults. So,
that's fair.
Yeah.
I think it might just be a thing for me if this is my first time coming to it. I don't have that nostalgia factor at all for it, so I'm not engaging with these characters in any meaningful way.
I mean, honestly, if someone said they think it's a 4, I really couldn't argue with them either. Like, I think anywhere in that range would be an understandable and acceptable score to give it, but I think it works well enough for me for what it is. Like, again, it's very much grading on a curve here, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, in terms of having to come down to an agreement, does it make the collection? Does it make the cut?
I mean, it's so weird to answer this because it's one of these movies that fits into on a personal level, it kind of gets in just for the weird, like, growing up value of it. But I would say no, it's not a straight making the collection, certainly. I mean, there's maybe an argument for cutting it close, but I'm definitely not making the collection.
I think that you're right in that it definitely doesn't make the collection. I would give it a cutting it close as well, just because it does have that. It's just a certain something to it. If you can really lean into the silliness of this, I think that you would really enjoy it. But
yeah, I think the big thing is that when it comes to disaster movies, one of the big things you're looking for, unless it's an exceptionally good one, and there's been a couple of those that we've talked about from the 70s, but typically what you're really looking for is the spectacle and the effects and like how good are those elements. Kind of like a slasher movie, you're wanting good kills. Hopefully you get fun characters, but you want good, nasty kills that are fun to watch. On that level, this delivers. And I think on that, I'd say cutting it close seems right.
Yeah, that's fair. The only thing I would say that I would have been looking for in terms of spectacle, like you said at the beginning, more lava.
More lava.
I feel like there wasn't any lava. So
yeah, there was 2 scenes with lava, and they were fairly quick. Don't worry, you're getting your lava quota next week. I promise you.
I'll take it.
Because next week we do Volcano, and I am delighted about it.
This movie was all about the ash. The ash was the big problem. Next time it's the lava.
Oh, there's still ash in the next one. In fact, they even explain it in the next movie. Like someone says, "Is it snowing?" And he's like, "No, it's ash." Because they don't explain it in this, it's just there. And I'm like, maybe that's like just them being more trusting of the audience to understand that. But regardless, we got more than that. Roger Donaldson, who directed this, usually I talk about the director before we even get to spoilers. I just forgot to bring him up. He did Species before this movie, which I also that's a movie I like. It's not a great movie, but it kind of fills the same vein where it's like a staple of like late night cable TV, kind of like Alien knockoff kind of movie. But his career since has not been, like it's a bunch of fluffy looking things, to be honest.
I was gonna say, I'm not sure I recognize any of these movies.
I recognize a lot of them, but I've seen like almost none of them other than Dante Speaking Species. Like his big hit probably is Cocktail. That was like really early on with Tom Cruise, so I imagine that's maybe one of his more high profile things. But like I've heard of The Bank Job, I've heard of The Recruit, I've heard of 13 Days, but I mean,
I think I've heard of Cadillac Man. Maybe that was just because of Robin Williams. Yeah.
But regardless, yeah. So not someone who I'm keeping an eye on, but yeah, Species was fun. So
hey, fair enough.
We already did that in Ace, so you're.
I'll watch it eventually.
You're in the clear, and you'll be happy about that. Not because Species is a tough watch, but because we also did Species 2, 3, and 4 as bonus episodes back when we did them, and they were maybe not 2, but 3 and 4 were extra reels levels of.
I was going to say, I think I remember going through the score sheet and seeing abysmally low ratings for those.
Rough times. Not that this director had anything to do with those, but. Anywho, so David will do his homework movie and just it's just Collector's Cut. Never mind, that's a different show.
But if you want to see some of my homework, that's over on the Atomic Cinema Experiment. That's also available on this channel.
Yeah, sci-fi movie podcast, the Atomic Cinema Experiment. Check that out. And I mentioned it early on. There's some bonus monthly shows on Patreon. There's extra reels, which I just kind of brought up, which is our $5 and up tier show where we do some of the worst movies of all time. Everyone also gets access to the Criterion Cut, which is a show where every month we do a movie from the Criterion Collection. So we get some of the best of the best and some of the worst of the worst. And, maybe one day they'll overlap somehow, but not as of yet. So
wouldn't that just be Armageddon?
That's not extra reels material.
I just hate it. I have a personal vendetta against that movie.
That's fine. You can hate it, but it's not extra reels level.
That's fair.
So there you go. All the support on the Patreon and things like YouTube memberships, but Patreon is the one that I mainly push. But all of that really does is why I can keep doing this the way I do it with so many shows. So if you want to keep them all coming, that is the way to support that. But of course, liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing it with people, all of that does help. So thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. We'll see you next week for Volcano. But this has been the Collector's Cut. So if you can get it, it's always nice to have volcanic immunity.